Mistakes in decision-making are not merely isolated incidents. Sometimes they leave severe, long-lasting consequences across generations. In American history, some of the worst political decisions have come from its most powerful leaders, the presidents of the United States. Today, we will explore the top 10 most horrific mistakes made by American presidents, decisions that have led to devastating consequences and impacted both the nation and the world. We begin with one of the most controversial events in recent history, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, tied to the names of Presidents Donald Trump and Joe Biden. In 2020, Trump signed an agreement with the Taliban, pledging to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan. However, this agreement was quickly criticized as a diplomatic failure. Notably, Trump planned and then abruptly canceled a secret meeting at Camp David with the Afghan government and the Taliban just before the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The agreement set a fixed withdrawal deadline without securing long-term peace, bypassed the Afghan government, and inadvertently paved the way for the Taliban to regain power. Specifically, Trump's decision to release thousands of captured Taliban fighters added complexity to the situation. When the Biden administration took over, they continued with the withdrawal in 2021 but mismanaged the process, turning an organized withdrawal into an emergency evacuation. The failure to anticipate the Taliban's return led to a humanitarian crisis as the Afghan government quickly collapsed, leaving Afghan citizens, allies, and American nationals vulnerable as the Taliban resumed power. Turning back to America's early years, President James Madison's decision to declare war on Britain in 1812 is also seen as a significant mistake. Madison wanted to protect American maritime rights, but was overly confident in the country's military capabilities and underestimated Britain's strength. The War of 1812 failed to resolve the disputes, disrupted trade, inflicted substantial economic losses, and led to the burning of Washington, D.C. Although the war ended with the Treaty of Ghent in 1815, it left serious economic and political consequences, and Madison achieved none of his original goals. Another costly mistake was made by President Franklin Pierce with the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, a decision that pushed America closer to civil war. This act allowed Kansas and Nebraska to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery, inadvertently dismantling the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and sparking violent conflicts between pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups, a period known as Bleeding Kansas. The ensuing power struggle intensified racial and social tensions, pushing the nation steadily toward a bloody civil war. During the era of expansion following the Spanish-American War, President William McKinley decided to annex the Philippines in 1898, citing reasons of civilizing and Christianizing the country. However, this action led to the Philippine-American War, a bloody conflict that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Filipinos, mostly civilians. The fierce resistance by the Filipinos not only drained American resources, but also sparked resentment, leaving a legacy of animosity toward the U.S. that persisted across generations in this Southeast Asian nation. During the Great Depression, Presidents Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover also made significant errors by deciding not to deeply intervene in the economy. With the laissez-faire philosophy, allowing the market to function freely without government intervention, they failed to provide timely support for farmers and other industries, leading to severe economic decline. Coolidge, the initiator of this policy, underestimated the impact of financial crises and growing social divides. Then came Herbert Hoover, who believed the market could self-correct without government aid. As the economic crisis worsened, Hoover did not enact enough relief measures, leading to millions of job losses and widespread bank failures. Hoover's hands-off approach is considered a factor that worsened the Great Depression. Another mistake linked to Presidents Ulysses S. Grant and Rutherford B. Hayes was their failure to protect the rights of African Americans in the South after the Civil War. Grant was not assertive enough in defending African American voting rights in the face of violence from white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan. After the contentious 1876 election, Hayes agreed to a covert deal to gain the presidency, which included withdrawing federal troops from the South. This action ended the Reconstruction era and left African Americans in the South subject to long-lasting oppression and racial segregation that persisted well into the 20th century. More recently, a major failure came from President Donald Trump in handling the COVID-19 pandemic. As the pandemic spread, Trump frequently downplayed its severity and repeatedly contradicted public health experts' recommendations. From minimizing the virus's dangers to suggesting ineffective treatments, like encouraging the use of unproven drugs, Trump led the U.S. into a devastating crisis. Millions died, and the economy suffered severely. Studies suggest that up to 40% of the deaths could have been prevented if timely and effective measures had been implemented. Next is a historically consequential decision that left long-lasting impacts on an entire generation: the decision to escalate involvement in the Vietnam War under President Lyndon B. Johnson. Despite personal doubts, Johnson decided to increase U.S. military presence in Vietnam, fearing that a withdrawal would damage America's international reputation. However, the Vietnam War became a painful wound, with over 58,000 American soldiers killed, and public trust in the government eroded. The war inflicted heavy casualties and infrastructure damage on both sides, especially Vietnam. One of the most infamous scandals was the Watergate affair, when President Richard Nixon decided to wiretap the Democratic Party. This act was not only highly risky, but also unnecessary, as Nixon already had substantial support and won the election easily. The Watergate scandal exposed a series of corrupt practices, leading Nixon to resign in disgrace and severely damaging the credibility of the U.S. presidency. Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, then stirred controversy by pardoning Nixon, creating a dangerous precedent for leniency toward leadership misconduct. Finally, one of the gravest mistakes by an American president was George W. Bush's decision to invade Iraq in 2003. Based on unconvincing reasons, the Bush administration deployed troops in Iraq, hoping to establish a model democracy for the Middle East. However, the Iraq War resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths, empowered extremist groups like ISIS, and drained massive U.S. resources. The war's consequences remain, causing instability in the region and a prolonged humanitarian crisis. The mistakes of American presidents have left valuable lessons. Through these examples, we see that even visionary leaders can make catastrophic errors, with repercussions not only for their country, but for the world. These historical lessons remind us of the responsibility leaders carry and the importance of prudent decision-making in the complex realm of politics and war. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue bringing you valuable content. Thank you, and see you next time.